Hi, welcome to this Kickstarter preview video for World Breakers Advent of the Khanate. This is a card game for 1 to 2 players that has a lot of playing value and a lot of different ways to construct your decks, play the game and enjoy a really interesting gaming experience. Players who enjoy open drafting, pre-constructed decks and games that have intense back and forth, card games that have intense back and forth without making them too complicated with unnecessary rules, they will definitely enjoy this game. Had a great time playing World Breakers, and the reason is very simple. The game is based on a very robust and well thought design framework, allowing for players having quick turns. So essentially you perform an action and then it's your opponent, then it's back to you and then it's your opponent. Each of the players does this for 4 actions, and then you have the rally phase, which does some various steps that I'm going to explain in the video later on. But essentially the options that you have are very simple. You gain resource, you play cards by spending the resources, you gain influence with the various 4 guilds that give you the ability and the requirements to be able to play more complex and more difficult, I would say more powerful, not difficult, cards that will allow you to do more. With the ultimate goal that you need to obtain power. The first player to reach 10 power is the winner, and then you will be the world breaker, changing and reshaping history. Now, the theme of the game of course speaks for itself. The art is very nice. The game is evolving around a Mythium, which is the currency essentially of the game, which is used to pay for cards that you play and perform various abilities that require you to spend a Mythium. But that's not only enough. You need to have specific standing, meaning influence, with the 4 guilds, because the cards belong to various guilds. So you can either play with a pre-constructed deck, or you can do some play with constructed decks, or play with open drafting and have cards from various guilds, etc. And also you will have neutral cards. So there are many ways to build your deck and explore things during a game of World Breakers. What I really enjoyed in this game, and I'm going to emphasize some of the points later on at the end of this video when I'm going to make my wrap-up about my experience from the game, is the straightforward rules, very easy to follow, the fast gameplay, the low downtime. So usually, typically in these games, you have to do a lot of things before it's your opponent's turn. Now it's boom boom, very fast. And this creates a lot of dynamic tension, and the goal is very simple. So you don't have to achieve something fancy or something extremely difficult. You simply have to get 10 power points, and you get power points by attacking your opponent. So the game encourages attacks and breaching essentially their blocking parties. You gain power points from actually developing various locations and building them and developing them in the various stages that they have, and from other cases and events. So essentially the cards of the game are events that they do something and then they're in the discard pile. They are also locations that you develop in order to gain resources and power points, and followers that they are used as the backbone of your attacking force and blocking force, and they have to be used with the correct abilities at the correct time in order to give you the advantage and steal it from the opponent. So bottoms, to summarize, bottoms up, it's a game that it's built from bottom to top on a very robust system. You don't have to be, I would say, a huge fan of card games or you know, complex games or card games like, I don't know, Netrunner or stuff like that, so to enjoy this. I found myself really drawn to the simplicity yet the depth of this game. That means that there are many options and many things for us to explore, but it's doing it through a very straightforward, makes sense type of design, and I think this gives this game lots and lots of points and thumbs up, from my opinion, from my perspective at least. So join me at the table, I'll show you how the game works, and we'll come back at the end of this video for more discussion on my final opinion of the game. But you already understood that I really liked and enjoyed the game. This is obvious. Keep in mind that this is currently on Kickstarter. I'm going to add the Kickstarter campaign at the description of this video, so you can navigate and explore the world of World Breakers for yourself and all the possibilities. The game has a lot of love and a lot of care thrown from the designer on it, and it has to be recognized, and it deserves a lot of publicity because it's an excellent game and really delivers a great gaming experience. So join me at the table, I'll show you how the game plays, and we'll be back at the end of the video with some more final points. Welcome to this Kickstarter preview video for World Breakers, Advent of the Khanate. We're in the late 13th century where history is altered by the rise of world breakers. These are individuals who harness the mysterious substance called mythium. They use this substance in order to magnify their natural talents. The Mongol princess Ktulun, a world breaker and a descendant of the great Genghis Khan, is reuniting the distant tribes of the Mongol Empire. However, other factions are rising to oppose her, each with their own agenda. Clash with your opponent in this fast-paced, customizable two-player card game, recruit followers to control the board, develop locations for power, and wrestle in order to control mythium, and you will forever reshape history. World Breakers is a two-player card game where players start with a World Breaker and a deck of 30 cards, and during the game players take turns to play their cards. You attack your opponent and try to gain power. The first player to finish a round with 10 power points wins the game. So before moving into anything else, let's familiarize ourselves with the components of the game. First of all, we have the double-sided turn tracker, where players alternate turns between phases. We have the round, the action phase and the rally phase, and then it's flipped into the opposite side so that the turn order is switched. We have 8 World Breaker cards and 24 signature cards, 2 copies for each. For example, here you see some of the World Breakers: Marco Polo, Ktulun, the Muhandasat, and the assassin, the leader of the Assassins of the Void. So these are portraits of your World Breakers, essentially your heroes, which you will use in order to lead your attack and your strive for victory against your opponent. You have various resources. You have 15 double-sided mythium counters. They depict a value of 1 from one side and a value of 3 from the opposite side. This is essentially the coin, I would say the currency of the game. We have 10 double-sided wound counters depicting 1 or 3 wounds respectively. This is what the players are fighting for. This is the power. These are 10 double-sided power counters, 1 power from one side and 3 power points from the other side. We also have the 10 double-sided +1 counters for modifying the stats of the players. And also we have the various stage counters for depicting with the X the various stages of the location cards. We'll explain this in a sec. But also from the opposite side they have the fortification counters, and these counters also have the shield, which is the stationary icon that we will also explain later on. So these are the components of the game. We have lots of cards. You can check them in columns. So I have set the pre-constructed deck, because you can play with drafting or pre-constructed decks and a lot of various ways to enjoy the game and make the best out of it. But think of them as 4 columns for the moment, because all those 4 columns are the pre-constructed decks broken down into individual components. So you have the World Breaker on the top, you have the respective 3 signature cards below for this World Breaker, for Marco Polo. Then you have the 19 Star Guild cards, which are linked with the star that this World Breaker belongs to, the Star Guild. And below there are some neutral cards. So the same setup is, so all this makes the deck of Marco Polo as a World Breaker. The same goes for the different other World Breakers, those heroes. They have their 3 signature cards, each of those below the respective World Breaker. Their respective 19 guild cards. So for example, this is the Star Guild. This is the Earth Guild with the symbol. The symbol with the moon is the Moon Guild, of course. And then you have the Void Guild here. And it's the same symbol that you have on the portrait of the World Breaker. At the bottom you have neutral cards. There are also some neutral cards here, because you can use the drafting, either a 2-player draft or a 4-player draft, or play with constructed decks or pre-constructed decks. So these are neutral cards that they are coming together as recommended for the pre-constructed deck. And you can see that they all have the neutral color banner respectively. In total there are 40 neutral cards, 2 copies of each. So far I had a great time playing World Breakers and I really recommend it. But before going into any details, let's see what the game is about. What is the object of the game? Of course it is power. Power represents your control of Mythium through conquest, political favors, intrigue, trade and any other means. You gain power counters, which are these again, and you need 10 in order to win the game at the end of the phase. You need 10 of those in order to be the winner. Actually, you need to be the first to reach the 10 power and gain victory because you have more power from your opponent. You gain power counters by developing location cards and attacking your opponent. So how we start the game? In order to start a game of World Breakers, we have to go through various steps, but they're very easy. Each player will take their World Breaker card that they have chosen and put it into play next to them so that it's standing vertical, not exhausted, available. Then each player will gather and take resources. You take 5 Mythium, so you take a total of 5 Mythium as a currency for you to start, and 1 standing from the World Breaker Guild. Standing is something special that we're going to explain. Essentially it depicts and it's linked with the favor and the trust of the respective guilds. So for example, Marco Polo comes from the Stars Guild, but that doesn't mean that other players cannot gain favor in this guild. That's why we have more standing cards that we're going to explain. As you gain more favor standing with one of the guilds, you slide the standing card of the respective guild below, so you may have more than 1 standing card below, depending on how much standing you have acquired influence essentially with each of the 4 guilds. We're going to come back and explain it. So for the moment, since if I have chosen Marco Polo and they belong to the Stars Guild, I already gain 1 standing, 1 influence with the respective guild, so I just slide the card as it is to indicate 1 symbol, meaning 1 favor with this guild. Then each player shuffles their deck and draws a hand of 5 cards. I'm going to show this in a minute, but keep in mind that your deck is consisted of your 3 signature cards, your guild cards and your neutral cards, that they can be either drafted, that we'll explain at the end of this video, or pre-constructed. In any case, all these cards are going to be shuffled. You're going to be your 30 card deck, and you're going to draw 5 cards out of your personal deck. Randomly you select the first player and you set the turn tracker in the center of the table. So this is the turn tracker. It is recommended that it goes between the players, so if the players are sitting opposite each other, you can put the turn tracker like that, because it has a dual function. First of all, it counts the turns, and then it shows who was the first player for this round, because once you go through 4 turns with each of the player altering, then you do the rally phase and then you flip it, and then the next player that was second player becomes the first player, etc. So you use this counter in order to track whose turn it is. So I would play 1 turn, then my opponent will play 1 turn, myself, opponent, myself, opponent, myself, opponent, and then we'll go to rally phase, and once we finish, we're going to switch it, flip it actually, and then my opponent is going to start playing as a first player for the next round. So starting with the first player, each player will use their 5 cards that they have drawn from their deck, and they can make a single mulligan to change what cards they will start the game with. To make a mulligan, you set aside any number of cards from your hand that you don't like. Then you draw the same number of cards from your deck, so your hand is back to 5 cards. And finally, you reshuffle the cards that you set aside back into your deck. Now you're ready to begin your first round of play. So this is how the game would look like. You'll have your deck over here. This is your hand. I'm just laying it in front of us for visual purposes, but this is hidden from the opponent. This is our hand. Then it's your World Breaker card here with the standing that they start the game with. This World Breaker Marco Polo belongs to the Stars Guild, so he starts with 1 influence in that guild. If he had more, through various ways to acquire more standing, he would have more also from other guilds as well. We're going to explain this later on. Each player has 5 Mythium. There are 5 cards in hand. They can do a mulligan, meaning they can discard as many as they want, as I mentioned, draw new cards and then reshuffle the discarded back into their deck, so that they still have 5. And each player has 1 player aid as well, which describes the basic actions. We're going to come back in a sec, plus some game terms, usually frequently used for easy access. So this is the, let's say, suggested setup. You have area in front of you for playing various cards like locations in the first row and followers, and then you need one more row above because when you engage in battle, or maybe you can do it sideways, you have to bring some of your followers to attack, and then the opponent has to commit followers to defend, moving them forward in the front line. But basically this is the setup of the game. So what about the structure of the round? Rounds in World Breakers consist of two phases, the action phase and the rally phase. The action phase. In the action phase, players alternate turns, each taking one turn for each of the 4 spaces of their side of the turn tracker. So you see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 turns in this round in the action phase, and the same goes for my opponent, and we alternate turns. Begin the action phase by placing the turn marker on the first space of the turn tracker, and each turn, as its turn is completed, you move the counter to the next space so that both players can see where they are in the round. A player's turns consist of one action chosen from the options available. So I take one action and I play, then my opponent does the same, and this goes back and forth, so each of us has taken 4 actions, and then we move to the rally phase, and then it's repeat. Action phase, rally phase. But before moving to the next round, what happens is we flip this one. So now my opponent will be the first player taking the first action in the next turn. And we go again through the same sequence, 4 actions, and then we move to the rally phase that we're going to describe in a sec. So there you have it. This is the way this works. So what about the actions? We're going to describe them a bit more in detail, but this is a reminder of the basic actions that you can have, and you choose one of those during each of those 4 turns that you play. What you can do is you can gain 1 Mythium, you can draw a card from your deck, you can pay 2 Mythium to gain 1 standing with any guild, you can play a card from your hand by paying the respective cost and of course making sure that any requirements are met, and then you can also choose to attack. You can also develop a location that you control, and all this will be explained further down in this video. So for the moment, what you need to know is during your turn you pick one of those, and then it's back to your opponent, and you do this 4 times before you move to the rally phase. Players normally do not have to make any decisions during their opponent's turn. The exception is combat, which consists of several steps and allows both players opportunities to affect the game. And combat is going to be explained later on, but after each player has taken 4 turns, then we proceed to the rally phase. Now a quick word about the rally phase, and I'm going to use this board, keep in mind this is prototype, to show you the steps of the rally phase. In the rally phase, players perform the following steps in order. First of all, they resolve any rally abilities. Some cards have abilities which have the rally condition. That means that if a player controls cards with these abilities, they can trigger them now. If multiple rally abilities are active, each player resolves the abilities they control in play order. And if a single player controls multiple abilities, they choose the order among themselves what they want to activate before the next one. Then we move to the second step, which is check for victory. Actually, this step has been changed because it has moved down in the sequence in the latest rules that I'm using to describe this how to play to you. So after we do the rally abilities, the next thing that we do is each player readies their followers. So that's the second thing that you do, you ready your followers. That means that each player readies all their exhausted cards. Combat and some card abilities can cause a follower and World Breaker cards, also your hero card, to exhaust. That means being tapped sideways. So when a card is exhausted for any reason, that means that it's tapped sideways, and then during this step you refresh them essentially. So that's done as a second step after the rally abilities resolution. And all of your cards are turned upright, and all exhausted cards that you control are refreshed. Then we move to gaining 2 Mythium as a third step. Each player gains 2 Mythium from the supply. Then as a fourth step, each player draws 1 card. Each player must draw 1 card from their deck, putting it into their hand. There is no limit to the number of cards a player can have in the hand during any time. So you start with 5, but you can have more or less. In some games, a player may run out of cards in the deck And if a player cannot draw a card in this step, their opponent will gain 1 power. So be careful, if you don't have cards to draw, your opponent will gain 1 power. And this is the only timing in the game where if you don't have cards to draw during this step, then your opponent gains 1 power. Meaning if any other ability dictates you to draw cards within the action phase, for example, your opponent does not gain 1 power. Okay, and then we move to the 5th step, which is check for victory. Each player counts how many power counters they control, which are these tokens here. I'm going to explain how you acquire them further down the road. So if you have at least 10 power, your opponent and your opponent has less than 10 power, then you win the game. If both players have at least 10 powers, the player with the most power wins. If, for example, you have 11 and your opponent has 10 at this step. And if players are tied for power and neither of them has at least 10, the game continues with another round. So this is the only step, the 5th step, where you check for victory. If you acquire the required amount of power points at any other stage during action phase or whatever, this may change. So you need to wait for the rally phase and the respective 5th step, which is checking for victory. And then what we do is we flip this card, this board, and we change the player order. The second player becomes the first player. We turn this, flip this turn tracker over so that the first space is on the other player's side. So now they're going to be first players. And after this step, we proceed to the action phase of the next round, respectively. So it's fairly simple, the rally phase. You follow the steps as I described them in this specific turn, and then you move to the next round. Now the play area. Each player should have a dedicated space to their left or the right of their deck for their discard pile. The play area is directly between the players, with the turn tracker at the center. While players are not required to arrange their cards in a particular way, it is recommended that you leave space near the turn tracker to place attacking followers and resolving events in front, and keep other followers you control in the second row of your play area, so just above here. So you can have, this could be in my hand, this could be my first row, for example, where I have followers, and here is where I have followers or events that I'm trying to resolve now or commit to battle. You place a World Breaker card on the side of the play area and keep your pool of Mythium counters and power counters nearby, so each player can easily see how many Mythium you possess at any given time. So let's move to the anatomy of the cards. Each World Breaker card has one of 4 types. World Breaker event. Each actually card in the game has one of the 4 types. So it could be either a World Breaker event, a follower, and a location. So the World Breaker is single. You just have your single card with the abilities that you possess. And now on the back it shows, I will explain later on, the signature cards that you start the game with, and then it's your ability. So this is your hero. So you can have either the World Breaker, which is a single card. You can have either event cards, followers, and locations. And each player has one World Breaker card, which they control for the entire game, so they cannot have more. Other cards are active only while in play, except for abilities that specifically state that they apply during out of turn. And we'll have a bit of more detail on each of those sections. So for example, this is an event card. This is a location card, and it says location, whether the events card says event. And another type of card you can have is the follower, which says follower. So either follower, event, location, and World Breaker card. These are all the different 4 types of card you have in the game. Keep in mind that each card type has a place for rules text, which describes the abilities it has in the game, and flavor text, which gives information about the World Breaker setting in our own real world history. So flavor text has no impact on the gameplay, as you would expect. Some cards have reminder text interspersed with the rules text, and the reminder text appears in italics and parentheses, so it's easy to differentiate. Also, you have the keywords highlighted if there are any, and reminder text has no actual gameplay function and does not supersede the full rules of the ability, just there for convenience. We're going to go now into the full anatomy of each of the 4 different types of cards. let's take a closer look on the World Breaker cards. Your World Breaker card presents your character, a leader vying for control of Mythium. Your chosen World Breaker gives you access to unique signature cards for using your deck, 3 of those, during the building of your deck step, or the pre-constructed one. And your World Breaker also has a guild affiliation, which determines your starting standing. Your World Breaker abilities are active and under your control for the entire game. So the breakdown of the card is very simple. Here are the 4 World Breaker cards included in this prototype. You have the card name, respectively, in the banner. Then you have the guild that they are linked to: Earth Guild, Stars Guild, Moon Guild, and Void Guild. So the icon is there on the banner. You also have the rules text, which is beneath. It says it's a World Breaker card. It has a World Breaker keyword. Also, it states written the guild that it belongs to. And then it has also beneath the rules usually some flavor that you see, for example, in this area. This one has some flavor. No, this one has some italics, but there will be some flavor cards in some of those, I think, in the final version. Then you have the signature cards. On the back of each of the cards you can see the 3 signature cards that they are linked with this World Breaker. So this one uses the Pride's Keshig, the Confident Suitor, and the 10,000 Ride. These cards are always used when you're using this World Leader, and the same goes with the rest. They have respective 3 signature cards listed at the back of their card. You also have the illustrator listed, or you should have it actually in the final version, and the card number and set symbol. Some effects demand special attention from your World Breaker, requiring them to exhaust, indicating that your World Breaker card is ready by placing it on an upright vertical orientation, and indicate that it's exhausted by turning it sideways, tap it essentially to the horizontal orientation. Your World Breaker will become ready again during the next rally phase at the end of each round, and each World Breaker has a number of signature cards listed on the back face. A card with a signature symbol is in its top right corner and can be only included in a deck if it's listed on the deck's World Breaker card. So not only do they provide 3 different signature cards, they're really important, but they also have different abilities for use. Then we have the events. Events carry impact one-time effects. When you play an event card, place it in front of your play area, on the side of your play area, and immediately resolve what it says, its abilities essentially. When you finish, you place the event on its owner's discard pile. The anatomy of the event card is very simple. You have the card name in the banner, respectively. You have the Mythium cost, if any, in the respective blue Mythium area on the top left. You have the standing requirement, meaning you need to have 2 standings with the Stars Guild if you want to play this event. 1 with the Stars Guild here, 2 with the Air Guild. No standings required for this event. Then you have the card type and traits described here. It says it's an event. It's a discovery, resource, destroyer, or resource. It says it's an event, always starts with an event keyword, as you can see. Then it has the rules text that you find below in the white section of the card. You have any flavor text that will be added during the final production of the game, the illustrator, and the card number and set symbol respectively. So pretty straightforward. When you play these event cards, you meet the requirements, you pay for them like with any other cards, you put them on the side, you resolve what they do, their abilities, and then you discard them, put them next to your deck during in your discard pile. Then you have the followers. Followers are people that join your cause. When you play a follower, you place it in the middle row of your side of your play area. Followers can help you in many ways with their abilities, by attacking your opponent and their locations, and they defend also your locations as well. In addition to their cost abilities, follower cards have 2 other important values: strength, which is represented in the number of wounds this follower can deal to another follower, and health, which represents what it takes to defeat the follower. If a follower has at least as many wound counters on it as its health value, it is defeated and placed on its owner's discard pile. Followers can also ready and exhaust, like other cards. You indicate a ready follower by placing them in a vertical orientation and exhaust them by turning them sideways to a horizontal orientation. Followers enter play ready always and can be exhausted during combat or by abilities, and exhausted followers become ready again during the rally phase at the end of each round. For example, you can see here various followers. Again, you have the card name in the middle on the banner. You have the Mythium cost, you need to play them like any other cards. You have any standing requirements listed in symbols from each respective guild, if any. You have the card type and traits listed in this section. It says it's a follower, a warrior, follower, a merchant, and you have the rules text below. You will also have some flavor text in the final production of the game. You have the strength indicated here with the crossed swords in the black circle, and you have the health in the red symbol on the right. So for example, this one has 6 strength, it's a warrior and has 2 health. You will also find the illustration, the illustrator and the card number and set symbol like with any other cards in the final production of the game. You see that they vary both in dynamics, different values and attributes, but also on the different abilities that they give to your cause. The fourth and last type of card you find in World Breakers is the locations. Locations are places such as mines, markets or fortresses. Each location card has an ordered list of abilities called stages. When you play a location, you place it in the back row of your side of your play area and place a stage counter on each step respectively. So something like that. You see I placed the counters, the tokens on each of those stages. Players develop their locations in order to trigger their stage abilities, and when a player develops a location, either using an action or through a card ability, they remove the topmost stage counter from the card and resolve the ability of that stage. So I would remove this one first, because it's the first one, and I would gain 4 Mythium. On another turn I would remove this one and draw 2 cards respectively. Keep in mind that locations can also be damaged. The successful combat allows the attacking player to damage one of the defending player's location. A few powerful card abilities can damage locations directly. Each time a location is damaged, you remove its topmost stage counter without resolving the corresponding ability. So if I would damage this one, I would remove this one, so the player would lose the opportunity to develop it and gain the respective stage benefit. And when the final stage ability of a location is finished resolving, or when the last stage counter is removed by damage, the location is depleted and placed back in its owner's discard pile. The anatomy is very simple. You have the card name, here is the Hidden Temple, here is the Solomon's Throne. You have the Mythium cost that you need to pay. You have the standing requirements, like any other cards. You have the card type and traits. This is a location, dwelling, this is a location, shrine. Also you find below rules text, and you find also ordered list of stages, so stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, whichever, with all of them stating different benefits that you gain. You have flavor text, illustrator, and card number and set symbol respectively. So these are the locations, pretty important, and the player must rely on them to develop them in order to gain the respective benefits at the correct timing. A word about resources. During the game, you will be accumulating and managing 2 types of resources, Mythium and Standing. Mythium is a mysterious substance which amplifies the natural abilities of World Breakers. Mythium counters represent the Mythium readily available for you to use, and there are these counters that you see here. They depict 1 Mythium unit from one side, and if you have them from the opposite side, you have 3 of those. So you start the game with, when you play World Breakers, with 5 Mythium in total, and you gain and spend over the course of the game. Each card has a Mythium cost, as you remember, that you have to pay in order to play the card, and the cost varies from card to card. And in some abilities also include Mythium as a trigger cost, so in order to trigger the ability described within the text and the rules, you have to pay with Mythium. To pay the Mythium cost, you simply spend the indicated amount of tokens and return them to the general supply. Keep in mind that there is no limit to the amount of Mythium you can have next to you as accumulative pool. The second resource, which is important, is the standing. Standing represents the access of trust of one of the world breakers with each of the world breakers guilds. As you remember, we have 4 guilds: the Earth, the Moon, the Stars, and the Void, that we explained before. And you start the game with 1 standing for the guild indicated on your world breaker card, and you track the starting standing separately as you accumulate them. So, for example, this world breaker belongs to the Earth guild, so they start with 1 standing. During the course of the game, you will be acquiring different amounts of standing with the different guilds. So, for example, this leader has 1 standing with the Earth guild, and this leader at this stage, down further within the gameplay, after several rounds, it has 2 standings with the Stars guild, 1 with the Earth guild, and 1 with the Moon guild. Many cards have a standing requirement depicted directly beneath their Mythium cost. So, for example, when you want to pay to play a card that we'll explain later, you have to pay both the Mythium, but also prove that you have the required standing without expending it from the respective guild indicated on the card itself. You must have at least the amount of standing shown on the card in order to play that card, and keep in mind that standing is not expended by playing cards, so you don't lose any standing with these respective guilds, although some card abilities can remove or spend a player's standing for other reasons. But typically it is accumulated by the players, and it has the influence, the level of influence for each of the 4 guilds. So again, this is 1 standing, and this is in total 4 standing, 2 with the Star guild, 1 with the Earth, and 1 with the Moon. Each player has 4 such cards, and in order to show that you acquire more, what you do is you slide the respective cards accordingly. So in this instance, I have 2 standing with each of those 3 different guilds as depicted on the card setup. And for the sake of showing all 4 different guilds, let me do that. Now we have 2, 1, 1, and 1. So all 4 guilds are depicted. So what about the guilds? The 4 guilds each have different strengths and weaknesses. In buying and playing a deck, when you build and you play with your deck, you may wish to focus on gaining standing with a specific single guild in order to access the most powerful cards which cost most standing. Or you may wish to seek a favor with multiple guilds to combine their strengths and mitigate their weaknesses. The Earth Guild, which is this one, is a ferocious guild of warriors and sages who connect with Mythium through meditation and training. Their guild employs efficient followers who swarm their opponent for points. Then you have the Moon Guild, which is this one. The Moon Guild is composed of engineers and scientists who use Mythium as power source for their inventions. They focus on controlling the board and slowly developing powerful locations. So you immediately understand that they are asymmetric in the way of play and where they're focusing. Then you have the Stars Guild, which is this one. The Stars Guild includes artisans and merchants who tap into the Mythium by infusing it into clothes, jewelry, and art. They slow down the opponent while developing locations in quick, unstoppable bursts. And then you also have the Void Guild, which is the last one over here. These are assassins and spies who weaponize Mythium directly. Void agents persistently nibble at their opponent's resources, winning through attrition. So they all have different types and style of play, so you can either focus on a specific single guild and get a lot of standing with that one, so you can access the most powerful cards, or try to balance it out. So let's see the actions that we can have in Worldbreaker. These are summarized nicely on this side of the play rate, and it's very useful. So during each turn of the action phase, the player whose turn is takes 1 action exactly. The section here explains all the possibilities that are available to the player. First of all, you can gain 1 Mythium. Take 1 Mythium token from the supply. This is as straightforward as possible. Second option for your main action when it's your turn is you can draw a card. Very simplistically put, you just draw the top card from your deck, so you pick up this card and you add it to your hand, which is hidden from your opponent. There is no limit to the number of cards you can have in your hand. Third option is to pay 2 Mythium counters and if you do so, you gain 1 standing with a guild of your choice. Simply, if I want to gain 1 standing with whatever guild I choose out of the 4 existing ones, I pay 2 Mythium and I increase my standing, as I have showed you before, by sliding the card to indicate the correct number of standing with this specific guild. Then you can play a card. So when you play a card, you play either an event, either a follower or a location from your hand. To play a card, you follow some very specific steps. First of all, you place the card face up in the play area. So for example, let's say I want to play this card, or I would say that one. I place the card face up in the play area, and any abilities on the card that affect the cost requirements to play it become active. Other abilities are inactive until the card itself becomes active. Second, I check that I meet the card's standing requirement, if it has one. So for example, this one expects that I have 1 standing with the Stars Guild, so I need to have it, and I already have 1 standing with that guild. Or it could be that I play a card that has no standing, or it has 2. For example, I couldn't play this card, which is a location, because it asks for me to have 2 standing with the Stars Guild, and I only have 1, so this is not a card I can play at this moment. So as soon as I check that I meet the standings requirement, if any, then I continue to the next step. Keep in mind that I don't spend the requirement in standing, so I don't reduce my standing with this Star Guild, I just show that I have it available. Then I pay the card's Mythium cost and any additional costs that apply. If you are not able to pay for the cost, all the costs, then you're not able to play the card, and you have to undo any steps that you have done so far. So for this case, I would have to pay 4 Mythium from my personal supply to give it out to the general supply by paying for the Mythium requirement. If the card I played is a location, so let's say for example that I had 2 standing and 2 Mythium, so I was like that. So I was able to play this location, then I would pay the Mythium, I would show that I have the required standing, I place the card in front of me, just above in the bottom row, above my hand, and I would place on it the appropriate number of stage counters to indicate that these need to be developed in order to use the respective stage ability. The card becomes active. If it is a follower or a location, it will remain in play. So if I have played, for example, this follower or this location, they would remain in play close to my first row, or at my first row. If it is an event, so for example, if I have played this card, keep in mind I only play 1 card, okay? So let me put those back, and let's suppose that I played an event. If I play an event, then I resolve its event abilities and I place the event back into the discard pile on the left or right of my drawing deck. If an ability allows you to play a card, you follow the same steps as if you had spent the action to play it. You pay the cost, you need to meet requirements as normal, unless the ability directs otherwise, and after you play a card, you resolve any enters abilities that the card may have. So this will need to be resolved at that stage respectively. So this is a main way that you bring cards into play, either locations or powerful followers that they can attack or defend against your opponent attacks, and these are the backbone of your growth and your development, if you want. So another option that you can do is you can attack. You begin a combat. A combat has several steps involving both players, and it's explained later on. We're going to go into more detail in a sec. To begin a combat, you must have at least 1 follower that can be declared as an attacker and forwarded close to the second line. So if I had a follower, for example, here, I would push it either on the side or towards my opponent so that they can see that they are being attacked and by which followers. But I need to have at least 1. I can attack with more than 1, and then the opponent can reply. We'll explain the attack sequence later on. Another option that we can do is we can develop a location. You develop a location you control. In order to develop a location, you remove its topmost counter. Remember the counter that I have put 1, 2, 3. If it's the top, the highest, the one that sits on the top is the one that it's undeveloped. So I simply use the action to remove its topmost stage counter and resolve the stage that corresponds to that counter. Then if the location has no stage because it was the last one removed, then it goes into my discard pile. Some stage abilities have additional costs or requirements separated with the effect of an arrow. You can develop a location even if you do not meet the requirements for the next step, or if you choose not to pay its cost, but in this case you will not resolve the stage ability and you will not gain the benefit, of course. And of course you can have the option to activate an action ability if that's declared as such. So these are the possibilities for the various actions, and they're pretty straightforward. So the one that we need to dive a bit more is the combat, how combat occurs. So, combat. When a player takes the attack action, that player becomes the attacking player and combat begins. Their opponent becomes the defending player. Combat consists of 3 phases that always occur in order: the attack phase, the defense phase, and the outcome phase. Once the outcome phase is complete, combat is over and the game proceeds to the next part of the round. So, let's see those 3 phases in a bit more detail. The attack phase. In this phase, the attacking player declares which followers are attacking and resolves any abilities with trigger conditions based on attacking. There are 2 steps in this attack phase. To declare, first of all, 1 or more ready followers that you control. So in order to declare the attack, you choose 1 or more followers that you control and you move them forward slightly within the play area and exhaust them. These followers are now attacking. Followers with a stationary ability cannot be chosen to attack. So for example, let's say it's my turn and I choose to attack. I will attack with those 2. So I'm moving them slightly forward and exhausting them to show that I am attacking. Keep in mind that this is my first row where I have the build locations, the followers that they are with me. So a bit further up, I slide and I tap the ones that are going to be part of the attack. This again is my hand and this is the hand of the opponent. Then the second step, some cards have attacks or your attack abilities. After declaring the attack, the attacking player resolves all of those abilities that they are applicable in order of their choice. The attacker, that is, again, I'm highlighting. And if an attack's ability appears on a follower, the ability only applies if that follower is attacking. So your attack abilities are applicable as long as the attacking player controls the cards they appear on. And once an attack is declared and any result abilities are resolved, we continue to the defense phase. In this phase, the defending player, in this case sitting across, sends their forces to contest the attack. While battles in the setting of Warbreaker are chaotic events with many engagements happening simultaneously, the game examines the fate of each attacking follower one by one. To resolve the defense phase, the defending player chooses whether or not to send a ready follower they control to block one of the attacking followers. They can perform any number of blocks, but each is resolved one at a time, and the defending player does not have to commit any future blocks until after completing their current block. To resolve the block, you follow again the 3 steps. You exhaust the blocking follower and clearly indicate which attacking follower is being blocked. So for example, I can take this one and that one for my available ones, slide them forward and exhaust them, indicating that this is blocking this attacker and this is blocking that attacker. If the blocking follower has a blocks ability, now it's the time to resolve it. Third, the 2 followers fight each other. Place wound counters on the blocking follower equal to the attacking follower's strength and simultaneously place wound counters on the attacking follower equal to the blocking follower's strength. If the blocking follower is defeated by this damage, the attacking follower still counts as having been blocked. Fourth and last step is that if the attacking follower is still in play, it is removed from combat and no longer counts as attacking. Have the attacking player move it back to the row with the followers not involved in the combat, keeping the orientation sideways, meaning that it has been exhausted for this round. Once the defending player has no ready followers left or chooses not to perform any other additional blocks, we continue to the third and last phase, which is the outcome phase. So in this case, simultaneously they will attack and inflict damage to each other. The amount of damage is the black number, the first one on the left. So this is a heavy warrior, so they inflict 4 damage. You only need to inflict 2 because he has 2 health points. So I'm adding 1 and 1, 2, which is exactly as many as needed in order for them to be defeated. But simultaneously the defender performs their attack and they also do 4 damage, meaning that this one needs only 3 out of the 4 that their archer inflicts. So in this case they would both reach their maximum health and they would both be defeated as such. In this case, this unit performs defending 1 attack to the attack, 1 damage to the attacker. You can still get 5 more because it has 6 health. It's a very, very strong follower, generous dealer, but it inflicts only 2 damage to them. They only need 1 to be inflicted, so that means that this unit and that unit is going to die. The same goes for this one, but this still endures. Now let's move to the outcome phase. The outcome phase determines the results of the combat. At the beginning of the outcome phase, each follower that is still attacking breaches the defender's forces. Remember that in this case, once the attack has been performed, they would, if they had less than their maximum damage, they would move here, and they would be, if they, let's say, this will be removed to the discard pile of the player. And let's say, for the benefit of the example, let's say that this is skilled, and let's say that there was one defender, one attacking player which was undefended, so this one was not blocked. Okay, so at the beginning of the outcome phase, each follower that is still attacking breaches the defender's forces. And remember that followers stop attacking when they are blocked or if they leave play. If at least one follower breaches, the attack is successful and the attacking player follows the steps. First of all, they gain 1 power. Let's say that this was unblocked and it was eligible to attack, okay, not blocked by a defender, so he only responded with, let's say he only used 1 or had no more available ready to use followers, so they only counted for 1, and then the second one was unblocked. So they would gain 1 power for each attacking follower you control, so in this case 1, but if I had more, if I had 2 unblocked attacking followers, I would get 2 power points, 2 power, so 1 plus 1 for each unblocked attacking that breaches the defenses. Then I resolve any breach abilities on my attacking followers, so if there are any breach abilities, they're being resolved. And third, you may damage a location controlled by the defending player. This removes 1 of their stage counters without resolving the stage ability, so they lose. So I would take the topmost one and I will remove it, so I wouldn't give them the opportunity to gain 2 mythium and 1 power in this case. If the attack is not successful, there are no additional steps to follow. So there you have it. This is a pretty straightforward section, the combat. It really has to do with having the correct type of followers to either attack or defend, and then having the advantage by having additional followers to attack and create breach opportunities for your defender and gain power tokens this way. So a word about keywords. Some complex or frequently used abilities and concepts are abbreviated using a keyword on the cards. This section now will define some of the keywords and explain some of the basic concepts. You can find them at the back of your player aid. So from one side you have the basic actions, and on the back you have the basic game terms that you find with keywords on the cards. So from top to bottom you can have Bloodshed. Bloodshed is a triggered ability that appears on followers. Bloodshed X means attacks. If a follower is attacking alone, it deals X wounds to one follower controlled by the defending player. And if a follower has more than one instance of Bloodshed, each applies separately, and each instance can wound a different one on the defending player's followers. Another possibility is being hidden, that you see here. Hidden is a static ability that appears on locations. A location with a hidden keyword cannot be damaged by anyone other than its controller unless the ability performing the damage specifically says that it can apply to hidden locations. Some abilities use damage to a location you control as a cost of drawback. Hidden does not prevent these effects or interfere with paying this cost. If a location has multiple instances of hidden, there are no additional effect. Then you can have the migrate, for example. Migrate is an effect with a special formatting, so you migrate with an effect, means that you gain or spend, for example, one standing with, I don't know, the Earth Guild. If you spend standing this way with the effect, despite the use of an arrow, migrating is not a cost and does not change the mandatory or optional status of the ability it appears in. And if you do not have, in this case, one standing to spend, one Earth standing, at the time you resolve the instruction to migrate, you must choose to gain one standing. You will not be able to perform the indicated effect. Overwhelm, which is described here. Overwhelm is a triggered ability that applies during combat. When a blocking follower is defeated in step 4 of the block, if the follower it was blocking has an overwhelm, the attacking player immediately gains 1 power. The attacking player gains power even if the attacking follower is also defeated. Followers with the overwhelm keyword get no special benefit when blocking. Defeating an attacking follower does not award power to the defending player. If a follower has multiple instances of overwhelm, there is no additional effect. The follower's controller will still only gain 1 power when the follower defeats a blocker. And some cards have a response ability with a trigger condition that uses the word overwhelms. A follower overwhelms when its controller gains power from its overwhelm ability. Stationary, which is described here. Stationary is a static ability that appears on followers. Followers with a stationary cannot be declared as an attacker. If a follower somehow gains a stationary keyword, while it's already attacking, the ability has no effect on that combat. Stationary has no effect on a follower's ability to block or deal wounds. If a follower has multiple instances of stationary, there is no additional effect, of course, because it only counts 1. Then you can have storage. Storage is a keyword that allows a card to hold other cards. Cards stored on another card are placed underneath the storage card and are not active. Cards can only be stored or removed from storage as directed by card abilities. If a card with store leaves play, any cards stored in it also go to the owner's discard pile. The storage keyword is always accompanied by a numeric value, which represents the card's capacity, how many cards they can store, and the capacity on a card is the maximum number of the cards that can be stored beneath it. If an effect allows you to play a card from storage, you can choose a card stored in your card that you control and that has the capacity to store cards. You cannot play or interact with cards stored on a card you don't control unless specifically directed otherwise, and unless an ability specifically directs you that a card can be stored face down, not possible in Worldbreaker's Advent of Khanate, cards in storage are face up and visible to all players. So these are some of the important keywords that you can find, and they're very self-explanatory, and after a couple of rounds they make perfect sense to all the players. Another important thing to remember are the golden rules that specifically state that specific card abilities have precedence over general game rules, and if a card's rule text conflicts or contradicts what is explained so far, then we follow the instruction of the card. What about abilities? Each paragraph of the rulebook has text on the card and its ability. Abilities come in 3 different types. We have triggered abilities, static abilities, and event abilities. Triggered abilities resolve at a particular time. Stage abilities on locations that are triggered abilities, and other triggered abilities can be recognized by a bold word which has a colon. There are various things that they can be used for, and they are very important during gameplay, so you have to strategize together with the abilities that you have. The ability timing is something important to also note. To resolve a triggered ability, event ability, or game step, you perform the following sub-steps. First of all, you check if the ability has, if the effects that the ability would perform meet the trigger conditions of any activate interrupt abilities, and if they do so, the controller of these abilities may trigger them one at a time. Then you perform the effects of the original ability or game step, accounting for modifications applied by interrupt abilities. Third, you perform cleanup if necessary, and fourth, you check if the effects of any occurred that occurred meet the triggered conditions or any active response abilities, or if any cards with enters abilities entered play. If any of these apply, the controller of these abilities may trigger them one at a time, following the steps that we already described for triggered abilities. I'm not going to go into more detail. You can find more explanations in the rules, so not to make this video extra long. You have also attack abilities. An event that initiates combat remains active in the play area throughout that combat, and the ability that created combat is not finished resolving until combat is over. And then we have the cleanup. Cleanup is a process that checks the status of game pieces in play area. Cleanup entails the following effects. For example, in any follower with a number of wounds counters equal to the or greater than the health, then they're removed and put back into the controller's discard pile, essentially killed. Any location with no stage counter is depleted and put back into the owner's discard pile unless a stage ability dictates otherwise, and it's still waiting to be resolved. Any counters that have been located on a card that has left the play are returned to the supply, and any cards in storage that have been stored on a card that has left the play also go to the owner's discard pile. We have some counters and counter effects. For example, we have the +1/+1 counter, which is this one. A follower with any number of such counters gets +1 strength and +1 health for each of those counters they have, so you can go on a really good stats. Stage counters are the last stage, after the last stage is removed, then and the stage is executed, then they are returned to the supply. You have stationary counters, which are those here on the back of the +1. These indicate that a follower with a stationary counter on it gains the stationary, which means that they cannot attack as long as they have this. They cannot attack themselves. And wound counters, either on denomination of 1 or 3, show the damage and the wounds that have been inflicted on the health of a unit, of a follower. That follower is defeated when has at least as many wound tokens as its health. Mythium counters and power counters that we collect have no built-in effects. Now, the last thing I want to discuss about the game before going to any more details is, and wrapping up essentially, is how you build your deck. World Breakers features 3 ways to play, which all share the same rules but have different procedures in creating your decks and makes it even more interesting. So you have the pre-constructed deck that I based my how to play upon. So I showed you the 2 pre-constructed decks of Marco Polo versus Cthulhu. Each copy of World Breakers Advent of Khanate comes with ready-to-play deck for each of the 4 guilds, and these decks are also valid for play using the customized deck rules. To assemble a pre-constructed deck, if for somehow you messed it or you want to reset the game, then simply you find the World Breaker card, you create a deck with your 3 signature cards that I have shown you at the beginning of this video, and the 19 cards with the standing requirement matching your guild. Remember the columns that I have shown you at the beginning of the video? And then you find the 8 neutral cards that they're described in the rulebook, and they're specific for each of the World Breakers. These are the neutral cards that have no guild icon, and they can be used also during drafting. The second way is you can have customized decks. To play with full customization, choose a World Breaker and 30 other cards from a deck. Each card in your deck must have a different name. Duplicates are not allowed in this play mode, and you can include any number of World Breaker signature cards, but no signature cards that belong to another World Breaker. You can freely mix cards. And also then you have the 2-player draft and the 4-player draft, which has a sequence described in the rulebook and that you can follow in order to fully have control on the deck by drafting it when you play a 2-player game or a 4-player game, and have full control of what you want to add in your deck and start playing. The rulebook comes with a glossary, and a lot of things are explained, but pretty much, I would say it's pretty straightforward how you play the game. There are also words about having the World Breakers campaign and setting up a campaign game. There will be also solo rules for playing the game solo, which is also very interesting, and looking forward to it. So there you have it. This is a whole package for World Breaker. I would say a magnificent, tiny card game of grand scope with lots of gameplay, great ideas, and above all, fantastic gaming experience. Great game. I'm a big fan of simple ideas that are, I would say, supported by good design and fast gameplay that lets you focus on the experience of the game itself and not having you going through booklets and rules to try to find out what is this keyword for, what is this condition, what is this rule, what is this asterisk, etc. This game really delivers a very tense back and forth between two players. You can start playing immediately by using the pre-constructed decks, which is great. They feel asymmetric because each one is focusing a bit more on some other things and, you know, staying behind on other, but you can also go for full drafting and customization yourself to make your decks the way you want according to the rules of drafting and constructing decks. The game really delivers a very, very intense, fast and sharp, I would say, experience. I really enjoyed the way that you're racing essentially to get 10 points of power. And the main driving force for accumulating those power points is to attack your opponent, use your followers that you have managed to put them into play, and try to attack your opponent. You can foresee if he has or if she has defenders to block them, and whatever is not blocked, then it will be used to breach your opponent's defenses essentially, and award you for each breaching attacker 1 power point. The attackers and the followers inflict damage, so they get wounds, so they can at some point they can be discarded out of play and into your discard pile because they are they're dead essentially. The locations provide a lot of tactical advantages because usually you spend a lot of money to build the locations, and then you spend action each turn to develop a location by removing the stage counter, which gives you access to the ability reward of that tier. And it can start by something simple, by gaining 2 mythium, 2 currency or whatever, and then build itself up to all the way to gaining power points, which is essentially your goal in this game. The event cards are really nice because you can use them carefully and time them from your hand at a specific time to make a difference. And of course the ability of your World Breaker, your hero, which is also asymmetric and also provides different abilities and possibilities. I really enjoyed that the fact that the card play in this game is straightforward. You have to pay the cost and mythium to play the card, but wait, it's something simple yet very interesting added in the mix, which is you need to have influence enough according to the card in order to be able to play the more powerful cards. So you can either focus on having more influence with 1 or 2 guilds, so that you'll be able to focus on those specific powerful cards that you're going to be able to use them and boom, make the difference versus your opponent. Or you can go and try to balance things out, have a bit of everything, so that you can have the possibility to play a variety of cards and have different ways to surprise your opponent and try to win the game. So overall, this is a fantastic game experience. I can't emphasize enough how much I loved the game. Typically, I don't have a lot of card games that in my collection. I always open into playing and trying games, but this one really surprised me. And it's one I will be coming back and back again and again because first of all, it's very easy to explain. I took the time to show you all the details and be scholastic, but keep in mind that you can easily explain it in a couple of minutes to everybody, and then just make a battle and make a session so that you can familiarize yourself and your opponent with the game. And then once you know the game, then oh god, all the possibilities, the different paths that you can try, the different combinations. I've tried so many things so far, and I'm really looking forward to trying more and more by combining different cards and different sets in order to make the game. And I'm really looking forward to the solo, because the prototype didn't have the components for a solo play, in order to try to play the game as a solo but also as a campaign. So lots of value in this game. I really recommend it. A great gaming experience that really delivers as promised. So this is World Breaker, a great card game with lots and lots of things to make it shine and stand out from all these games out there by now. So many thanks for watching.